It was said that the earth would give a warning before reclaiming what was rightfully hers, but Baba Bunga warned of a nation that would not receive such mercy. No shaking, no tremors, no thunder in the sky, only silence. And then the disappearance, one night, a nation, an absence that would echo around the world like the howl of a lost age. For decades, the Bulgarian mystic, known as the blind prophetess of the Balkans, whispered of this sudden loss, a country swallowed not only by water, but also by betrayal, blindness, and an ancient reckoning. At the time, her words were dismissed as metaphor, but now, as the world's faults, both political and tectonic, shift and fracture, her warnings carry a weight they never had before. There is one prophecy of hers too strange to have been taken literally, at least until now. She said, "The world will forget a flag because the earth will no longer hold it." Many believe that flag belonged to a nation surrounded by a silent danger, a danger that neither satellites nor scientists can fully predict. The chilling thing is that we are seeing this scenario unfold before our eyes, and almost no one has connected it to Baba Bunga until now. Before we delve into this unraveling mystery, remember that once inside this message, you may never look at world maps the same way again. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this interconnected zone before you are fully drawn into this prophecy. Consider becoming a member to support this ongoing exploration of forgotten truths. And keep watching, because as this prophecy unfolds, you will be asked to consider where the signs are really pointing. Baba Bunga's prophetic messages were always shrouded in enigmatic language. She never gave direct names, she offered symbols, metaphors, and feelings. Regarding this particular vision, he is said to have declared, "It will be a place where water springs from the ground, not from the sky. The earth will devour its people, and the map will be redrawn in a single night, without enemy, without warning, only silence." At first glance, it sounded poetic, but hidden within that unsettling expression lies a strikingly accurate description of a geological phenomenon now considered one of the greatest natural threats of the modern world: land subsidence and coastal liquefaction. In the last 5 years, nations situated along major fault lines and low-lying coastlines have begun to report subtle signs of instability, from Indonesia to Italy, from parts of the United States to Bangladesh. Experts have observed entire populations that appear to be sinking, but not solely due to flooding or rising sea levels. Some cities are sinking several centimeters each year. However, Baba Bunga's warning did not speak of gradual deterioration, but of something sudden, something capable of redrawing the map in a single night. Many of Baba Bunga's followers point out that she didn't always give specific years, but when she did, they were generally associated with sudden transformations. For the year 2026, she left only fragments of a longer message, one that many believe was lost or perhaps intentionally hidden. However, there is a haunting fragment from a vision in the late 1980s, in which she spoke of a month that will taste of salt, though no tears will be shed. A city will fall, not because of war. A nation will sink, not in battle. And the earth will close its mouth before dawn. With reports now emerging of underwater subsidence, unexpected tectonic plate shifts, and weakened coastal sediments, some scientists have begun quietly warning of a possible cascading failure event, where infrastructure collapses in parallel with natural subsidence. What science calls an engineering risk, Baba Bunga described as a spiritual adjustment and linked it, whether through imagery or intuition, to a global spiritual imbalance. Let's take a closer look. According to her clues, the nation that would vanish overnight would meet 3 chilling criteria. First, water gushing from the ground, a place where groundwater, aquifers, or ocean pressures destabilize the earth. Second, a coastal capital or key port city. She referred to a mouth that feeds ships, hinting at a major port or naval base. Third, ignored warnings. They are warned, but laughter is louder than the trembling beneath their feet, she said. Based on these 3 signs, analysts in the prophetic community have narrowed the possibilities down to 5 nations: Indonesia, Japan, the Netherlands, Bangladesh, and parts of the United States, specifically Louisiana or California. All have experienced sudden subsidence or unusual seismic activity, but one name stands out among them. In recent months, in mid-2026, scientists published data from the Caspian Sea and the Sicilian Basin suggesting dangerous shifts beneath Turkey's southern coast. This area, already prone to earthquakes, is also near faults that have remained dormant for too long. Some have begun to wonder, could it be Turkey? But Baba Bunga offered another unsettling clue: the eagle will soar above, but find nowhere to perch. Could this allude to the United States, long considered invincible, yet increasingly fragile beneath its coastal cities? As the world races to prepare for cyber warfare and the dominance of artificial intelligence, a quieter threat is literally rising from below. Large-scale geophysical surveys in 2024 and 2026 have confirmed what Bunga seemed to intuit decades ago. The Earth is not stable beneath our feet. In places like New Orleans, Jakarta, Venice, and the Bay of Bengal, subsidence, the gradual sinking of the land, is no longer a slow threat. It is accelerating. In Jakarta, entire districts are sinking more than 10 centimeters per year. The Indonesian government has already begun relocating its capital to Borneo. But this is not merely about urban planning, it is about survival. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, experts have long warned that a single major event, an earthquake, a hurricane, or a critical infrastructure failure, could cause parts of the state to disappear underwater almost instantly. This eerily mirrors Baba Bunga's vision of a place devoured before dawn, with no enemy, no war, and no resistance. Most frightening is that scientists, seismologists, and military analysts are now quietly advising governments on how to prepare for a loss that cannot be stopped, only assimilated. Scholars of prophecy often return to a phrase attributed to Baba Bunga: "A flag will disappear, not through conquest, but through collapse. The sea will retain its colors, but not its people." Could this be literal? A national flag swallowed by the sea. Today, 5 countries are dangerously close to that fate. Bangladesh, which barely rises above sea level and is vulnerable to storm surges and glacial skies. The Netherlands, which survives thanks to dikes and pumps that hold back the ocean every day. Indonesia, which is already relocating its capital due to flooding and subsidence. The Maldives, the lowest-lying country on Earth, and certain regions of the United States, such as South Florida, New Orleans, and parts of the California coast, where groundwater extraction and tectonic stress combine. But if an entire nation were to sink overnight, the shock waves, both political and symbolic, would be greater than anything we have witnessed in modern history. And according to Baba Bunga, it wouldn't be just about geography. She warned that this would mark a spiritual turning point for the world, that once that flag disappears, the countdown to a greater collapse will begin. One of the most unsettling elements of her prediction was the emphasis on human arrogance. He is said to have declared, "The earth screams long before it breaks, but they dance to the noise of their cities." In other words, the signs are there, but nations are too distracted, too trusting, too consumed by day-to-day politics to hear them. And isn't that what we see now? In coastal cities like Miami, officials rush to build walls and pumping systems, while luxury towers continue to rise along the water's edge. In Venice, tourism keeps flowing even as the foundations erode. In Japan, new nuclear plants are placed in areas of high tectonic volatility. Ask yourself, why do we build deeper into danger when we know what it means? Why does modern humanity treat prophecy as superstition until it's too late? Bunga described the event as something without warning, but with signs in the skies and beneath the waves. Interestingly, anomalous phenomena have been reported around the world since the beginning of 2026, with unexplained sounds nearby from coastlines, strange tides and satellite readings showing unusual heat signatures beneath certain faults. In the Cascadia subduction zone off the west coast of North America, scientists recently detected bursts of deep tremors with no clear explanation. They called it a slow quake and are monitoring it closely. Why? Because it could precede the major megathrust earthquake feared to devastate parts of the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, unusual patterns of bioluminescence were observed in the Andaman Sea just weeks before a slight but unexpected tectonic shift, and fishermen from Turkey, Greece, and Israel reported strange movements in the water with currents creeping in unnatural directions. Could these be the signs Baba Bunga spoke of? And if so, how many more must occur before the world takes notice? In a rarely translated quote from 1993, Baba Bunga is said to have said, "The earth reclaims what was unjustly taken. Lands built on broken promises will crumble." The sea remembers. Many researchers interpret this not only as a geological statement, but also a karmic one. She believed that certain places would face the full consequences of their spiritual and environmental debts. Think of man-made lands, drained swamps, diverted rivers, coastlines extended with artificial soil. Think of countries that buried their corruption under concrete or whose wealth came from exploiting nature. These could be the exact places Baba Bunga was referring to as those that dug their own graves beneath their cities. Her prophecy wasn't just about a natural disaster, it was about a reckoning. What makes all this even more unsettling is how perfectly it aligns with modern geopolitics. By 2026, many major powers are under strain. Climate migration has already begun, while island nations seek resettlement agreements. Some governments have quietly negotiated land purchases abroad, preparing for a potential loss of territory. What was once dismissed as apocalyptic planning is now active policy. Baba Bunga's vision of a nation vanishing, its inhabitants' fate unknown, reflects real questions of the world today. Where will tens of millions of people go if Bangladesh is irretrievably flooded? What will happen if New Orleans is struck by both an earthquake and a storm, as some models predict? Who will own the sea when a land no longer exists? These questions no longer belong to a distant future, they are imminent. It was said that Baba Bunga spoke little about what would happen during the disappearance, only that it would occur without war, explosions, or resistance, but he did speak extensively about what would follow. He said, "There will be a silence so profound that the winds will cease. The world will not breathe for a day, and then panic will return, stronger than any storm." This is perhaps the most unsettling part of his prophecy. The shock of seeing a modern nation vanish, not through invasion, but because nature itself turned against it, would send shockwaves through every government and every society. News networks would scramble to get footage. Leaders would issue emergency speeches. Military alliances would go on high alert, not because of an external enemy, but out of fear, because now the very soil itself would be the threat. She added, "Those who laughed will be the first to scream." This has been interpreted as a warning to skeptics, to those in positions of power who ignored early signs, dismissed prophetic warnings, and prioritized economics over ethics. Perhaps the most tragic part of the prophecy is Bunga's assertion that there would be no evacuation. She described lights being left on in windows when the waters arrive, suggesting that people will continue living normally, unaware of the approaching catastrophe. This points to a catastrophic failure of communication, that warning signs would be ignored, covered up, or politically silenced. In our age of hyperinformation, this idea seems impossible, but let's think again. Consider the bureaucratic delays, the distrust of government announcements, the corporate interests seeking to keep cities running, even when danger is imminent. This was Bunga's most profound warning. When truth is ignored for profit, nature becomes the ultimate truth. If you are seeing this, and if you live near a vulnerable coastline, take a moment to reflect. Are the systems around you truly prepared for a sudden and irreversible change? Do you trust them to act before it's too late? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, especially if you live in one of the coastal areas mentioned. In one of his lesser-known writings, supposedly kept private by a close relative and later shared in fragments, Baba Bunga said, "Children will look at the map and ask what name went there." That sentence made the blood run cold for those who study his work. He predicted that after the disappearance, there would be debates about whether or not to include that nation on maps, in textbooks, in digital databases. He warned that the name itself would become controversial, that some would want to erase it completely, as if its disappearance were a punishment and not a tragedy. This prophecy hints at a narrative war that would follow the physical disappearance, and we are already seeing that unfold in modern geopolitics. When a land disappears, whether by annexation, by whether due to war or environmental collapse, its history becomes a matter of dispute. Who has the right to speak for it? Who benefits from its absence? Bunga's warning was clear. The truth will disappear with the land if the living do not defend the dead. Beyond the disaster itself looms another shadow, the fate of the people. Baba Bunga said, "They will walk with clothes still wet from the sea, but no one will open the door. Nations will fear what they bring with them." Scholars of his prophecies believe he was referring to the survivors, the millions of displaced people who will seek refuge in a world already fractured by suspicion, rising nationalism, and scarce resources. His vision was not just of a physical disaster, but of a moral collapse that the world would hesitate to help with, not because it couldn't, but because it would be afraid. By 2026, the global number of refugees had already surpassed historic highs. Now, imagine that overnight another 20 or 30 million were added. Not because of a military invasion or bombs dropped, but simply because their home disappeared beneath the sea. And yet, according to Bunga, they would carry a message. He believed that the survivors would become spiritual messengers, bearing warnings, truths, and a renewed awareness of the earth that others would need to hear if only they would listen. The most controversial line of his vision was this: "When one land falls into the sea, Another will rise in power, not in territory, but in spirit. Many believe she meant to warn of a geopolitical realignment. After the disappearance of one nation, a new spiritual center of the world would begin to form. Some interpreted this as a literal new global leader, but others believe the meaning is deeper. A collective awakening that will begin when humanity becomes aware of its true vulnerability. She anticipated that this tragedy would trigger a profound reevaluation of what nations truly are, not just borders and flags, but responsibilities to the earth, to the future, and to one another. And this is where it becomes even more chilling. She said, "It will not be the last. One falls, then two follow, but only the third will bring the world to its knees." This ties in with another of Baba Bunga's visions, known as the prophecy of the three losses, which is spoken of in hushed tones, but almost never in public. According to fragments shared by those who preserved her private notes, she believed that three great nations would face dramatic collapses between 2026 and 2032. Not all sinking, but each through a different form of collapse. One would disappear beneath the earth, another would burn from within due to civil unrest, and the third would split in two through spiritual warfare. She warned that once the first was lost, the door would be open for the next two, that the earth, once reclaiming one, would not stop until balance was restored. It sounds ominous, and it is. But she also believed that this process would awaken the world, that only through these losses would we learn how deeply connected we all are. In a final note on this prophecy, Baba Bunga is said to have mentioned something cryptic. The nation that sinks will be reflected by another, but its reflection will not fall, it will only break from within. Many analysts believe he wasn't speaking of a single nation, but of two, linked spiritually, economically, or historically, whose destinies would unfold in a synchronized yet opposing fashion. One would physically disappear, the other would remain standing, but torn apart by invisible forces: mistrust, rebellion, ideological collapse. Some have speculated that these mirror nations could be the United States and Japan, Indonesia and China, Bangladesh and India, Turkey and Russia. And if one of them sinks, the mirror shatters. The other begins to fragment, perhaps not geographically, but certainly spiritually and politically. The silence following the first fall would become a warning bell for the second, though only the wise would heed it. The second doesn't drown, but forgets how to breathe. A phrase that seems to speak of cultural amnesia, moral decay, or a loss of truth. Let us know in the comments which pair of nations you think Baba Bunga was referring to, two countries that have always walked side by side in destiny and will now face two distinct forms of collapse. One of the most shocking parts of this prophecy is often overlooked. Baba Bunga said, "You will know the time has come when the sand no longer falls the same." This metaphor of the hourglass, of time changing shape, led many to speculate that she foresaw a moment of temporal distortion in which global perception would alter the sense of time. She asserted that time would feel shorter, sharper, without a defined form. Could this refer to a collective shift in consciousness that would follow the disappearance of a nation, an instant when human beings would feel detached from the normal order of time? Today, psychologists speak of time compression in situations of trauma, how days seem like hours and events feel unreal, like a dream. It is as if she had anticipated the global disorientation that would follow such a loss. Bunga's idea was not that time would literally change, but that our experience of it would be distorted. The sudden absence of a land, a people, a flag would warp humanity's relationship with history, memory, and destiny. And yet, the prophecy does not end in destruction, but in choice. She said, "When the water closes over the earth, the sky will open. Two paths will appear. One leads back to fire, the other to mist and light, but only the awakened will know which is which." This enigmatic phrase has become one of the most debated in Baba Bunga's legacy. The general consensus is that it points to a global turning point, a crossroads in human consciousness brought about by the disappearance of a nation. What she called fire may represent retaliation, division, resource wars, and the overflowing of fear. The mist and light could symbolize healing, humility, and planetary unity, but only if the world is willing to see the profound message in the disaster. In other words, the sinking nation doesn't just die. It offers the world one last lesson, a final mirror, a test of who we are. Why would Baba Bunga have given such a terrifying prophecy? Was it to frighten us? No. She often repeated, "Only the blind fear the shadow. Those who know recognize that it is nothing more than a reflection of light." Her intention was never to sow panic, but to awaken a sense of responsibility. She believed that these glimpses of the future were given to us so that we could change the outcome or at least prepare our spirits. She never asked for worship, only for listening. And now, in August of 2026, when the signs are everywhere, from sinking cities to mysterious patterns in the sky and displaced populations, her words feel less like a mystery and more like clarity. This is not about blind faith. It is about observing the present and recognizing how closely it resembles the vision she shared decades ago. If anything is clear in this prophecy, it is that no nation stands alone. The earth is not divided by borders, but united by pressure points, winds, tides, and spirit. And if one flag disappears from the map, it changes all the others. That is why this interconnected space exists, to explore those ties, to trace the hidden lines between past and future, between science and mystery, between nations and the soul. And if you've stayed this far, you are one of those who see beyond the headlines. You are one of those who feel the undercurrent, one of those who recognize the patterns. So here is your invitation. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Don't just watch. Be part of this growing community that refuses to ignore the signs. Like this video, share it with those who still dismiss Bunga's vision, and if you feel the urge, consider becoming a member to support deeper investigations like this. Your support helps us delve deeper into the forgotten, the hidden, the almost lost. And if this resonated with you, please consider clicking like and subscribing to the channel. It's a simple gesture that tells us you believe these messages matter, and they do. We want to hear from you in the comments. Which nation do you think Baba Bunga spoke about? Do you think it will happen suddenly, or has it already begun? And what do you think the world must do to avoid becoming the next forgotten flag? Remember, prophecy isn't prediction, it's potential. And now that you've heard this one, you can no longer ignore it. Stay curious, stay grounded, and above all, stay connected.